Okay, can we get started? I'd like to get started quick because I have more slides than I can possibly get through in an hour and a half. So if I'm moving too fast, please let me know, but I'm going to cover a whole lot of ground in a pretty short time. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm Chris Coleman from Tennessee Justice Center, by the way. So we're talking, this is the advanced TennCare eligibility class. We're going to go do a pretty deep dive into determining TennCare eligibility. And there's three main groupings or eligibility categories. There's the MAGI category, which is the modified adjusted gross income. The MAGI category was a creation of the Affordable Care Act, and it was meant to unify the way premium tax credits for marketplace plans were calculated. It's meant to unify those with basic Medicaid income rules so that there would be a sort of seamless transitions. You wouldn't have gaps or overlaps between people's eligibility for premium tax credits and Medicaid. But it did not do away with all the old income counting methodologies. So we have medically needy spend down, which has its own separate counting methodology, a lot of similarities. All of these have some similarities, some differences with the MAGI categories, which we'll spend the most time on. Then we have the ABD category, aged, blind, disabled. These are generally all the SSI related categories and the Medicare savings programs. But the first thing we were going to talk about is just household counting. Who is in the household? This is a sort of a, it's important because everything, all the eligibility categories, really except one, are based on household income. Anybody know what the one that has no income requirement at all? Former foster children. If someone was on TennCare, they aged out at age 18, they were on TennCare when they aged out, they remain eligible for TennCare until they turn 26, regardless of income or resources. I'll talk more about that one later. But to determine household, everything else is based on household income. And to figure out the household income, you've got to know whose income counts and what income counts. So does my son's summer job check count toward my eligibility? Different things like that we're going to have to figure out. And the household counting rule is pretty complicated because your household size is an individual determination. You could have multiple people living under the same roof who have different household sizes. Even if they're relatives, they could have different household sizes. There's also, as I said, there's different rules for the three different categories, the eligibility methodologies, and rules differ depending on your tax filing status. So we're going to go through some of these rules. First, for the MAGI categories. So MAGI, again, these are what are generally called the MAGI categories. Children, pregnant women, parents, and caretaker relatives. MAGI is also used for cover kids and for premium tax credits and cost sharing subsidies on marketplace plans. So all of this is all a unified income counting methodology. So under MAGI, when you're looking at somebody, you ask, okay, who is this person in front of me? Is it a child? What category would they fall into? And we're going to go, at the end, we're going to go back through a lot of categories, but are they a child? Are they a pregnant woman? Are they trying to get a marketplace plan? Are they looking for cover kids? Are they a pregnant woman? The first question you're going to ask after that is, what is their expected household, expected tax filing status? So all this goes back to, what is your tax filing status? And there's only three things you can be. Your tax filing status, you can either be a tax filer who is not claimed as a dependent on anyone else's taxes. So it's possible to be a tax filer and a dependent. So it's a teenager or something who's also being claimed on the parents, but may file to get their own refund. So tax filers not claimed as dependents. There's dependents, anyone claimed as a dependent on someone else's income tax. And then non-filer non-dependents, people who do not file taxes, nobody claims them. A lot of our clients probably fall into that category. Now, that's the first question. You have to figure out what their tax filing status is. So here's your group of 3 things. Everybody's going to fall into one of those. Now, the household size, depending on where you are in that tax filing status, will always be one of 2 things. The household size will always be either the tax filing unit, which is the filer and everyone claimed as a dependent on that tax return. That's one. We'll call that the tax filing unit. And then there is parents, minor children, and minor siblings who live together. So you got the 3, and what I'm going to tell you is once you know the 3, what someone's tax filing status is, you know they're going to fall into one of these 2 things. Which one is it? We're figuring out which one of these 2 things is going to count. So just to clarify, for the marketplace, if somebody's applying for coverage on the marketplace, an individual must be under 19 to be a qualifying child in the household. Again, right now we're talking about household size. It is different for categorical eligibility. Categorical eligibility, if you're looking at a parent or caretaker relative, that's their category. And for them, they have to have a child 18 or under. Here, for the child to count in the household, the child can be under 19 or, TennCare under 18. Here it's 19 or full-time students up to 24. And for TennCare, the child is not under 19 or a full-time student under age 21. Everybody get the difference between the categorical eligibility and whether someone counts in the household. Really quickly, I'll give you an example. If you have a full-time student who's 23 years old, they count as a minor child in the household, but that parent is not eligible as a caretaker relative because the child is defined differently in the 2. So the parent doesn't have a minor child, though that child will still count as a member of that household, and any income will be counted towards whoever's applying in the household. If someone, I know that's very complicated, but let's move on. We'll answer questions about it later. This will become clearer. It seems really simple, and then it seems really complicated, and then it will seem really simple again. For someone applying for premium tax credits, they're going through the marketplace, they want to buy an Obamacare plan, and they want to get premium tax credits. The household size is always the same. They are always going to be the tax filing unit. That's because premium tax credits are awarded through the taxation system. The IRS calculates and awards those and collects any taxes that are owed. So the tax filer, all claim dependents. Whenever you're asking, might this person be eligible for a marketplace plan? The question is, their household size is going to be who's on your taxes. They're going to have to enter when they're applying, yes, I'm going to file taxes. Here's everybody that I'm going to include on that tax return. So, and some of you have seen this before, know that back in the day, there was a TV show called Nashville. I think it's still on country music television or whatever that is. What is it, What's it called? Country? Nashville? Yeah, CMT. Yeah, CMT. So I still use the character from Nashville because it was a soap opera and lots of people intermarrying and yours, mine, ours kids. So it's good for that. This is Mayor of Nashville, former Mayor of Nashville, Teddy Conrad. He has 2 kids. Let's say he's single. He has the 2 kids. For premium tax credit, he files. He claims both children as dependents. Household size is 3. Tax filing unit, easy enough. Always for premium tax credit, it's the tax filing unit. Now, for TennCare, a tax filer who is not claimed as a tax dependent, it's the same. Tax filers, no matter what they're applying for, if their tax filer is not claimed as a dependent, they are always going to be the tax filing unit. Whether they're applying for premium tax credits, in which case everybody, no matter what their tax filing status, if they're claimed as a dependent, they're in that household unit. On TennCare, if you file taxes for purposes of MAGI categories, your household is your tax filing unit. So household size, tax filers, always the same. Non-filer, non-dependents. Again, their rule is always the same as well. Non-filer, non-dependents are always going to be in that parents, minor children, minor siblings living together. This includes stepchildren, step-parents, step-siblings as well. So there's 2 simple rules. and they're both cut and dried rules. Tax filers, always the tax filing unit. Non-filer, non-dependents, always this household unit rule. It's tax dependents where things get complicated. The household size, the default is the tax filing unit, the household of the tax filer claiming the dependent. So for tax dependents. But there are 3 exceptions to that rule. First exception is the tax dependent is not the minor child or spouse of the filer. So it's possible if you're filing taxes to claim your cousin who lives with you or grandma who lives in the upstairs room. You can claim them as dependents, but they are not the minor child or the spouse of the tax dependent. Therefore, you don't use the tax filing rule, you use the other, that household unit rule. So these are the 3 exceptions where tax dependents, you use that household unit rule rather than the tax filing unit. Second is tax dependent is a minor child living with both parents who are unmarried. There's slightly broader than that actually. If the parents do not file a joint tax return, if they're unmarried, they're prohibited from filing a joint tax return. But if the parents decide for whatever reason to not file a joint tax return, this would also apply. Or the tax dependent is a minor child claimed as a tax dependent by a non-custodial parent. So kid lives with mom, non-custodial dad claims the child on his taxes. That's the 3rd exception. So see, we've got 2 categories, 3 different things. 2 of those tax filing statuses are always the same. It's only tax dependents that are different, and all we're looking for is these 3 exceptions. Couple of caveats there. Tax dependents, their income only counts in the household if they make enough to be required to file taxes. So I will actually talk later on how much that is. I don't recall off the top of my head right now. So again, this is only if they make enough to be required to file taxes. If they file taxes and they don't make enough to be required, that income does not count. I'll talk more about this in the second part when I'm talking about what income counts. And always remember that any changes in the household can change your eligibility because it changes household size. So adoption, divorce, death, a minor turning 18, all of those can change all of this. A couple of caveats there. Reminder, married couples generally must file a joint tax return to receive premium tax credits or cost sharing reductions. When I say generally, what's the exception to there? Anybody know? When can a married person not file a joint tax return and still get premium tax credits?
They've been separated for the last 6 months of the year.
DV or estrangement. So if there are reasons, and in those cases, CMS has specifically said you can lie on your application because the application does not ask for this. CMS put down guidance saying if in cases of domestic violence or estrangement where the other person can't be located, you can lie, even though you're signing under penalty of perjury, you can write single on your application. TennCare, married couples who live together are counted in the same household regardless of their tax filing status. Married couples.
Is understanding about that lie is CMS is?
I haven't heard any different. I mean, they've put out written guidance on it. So. And for the marketplace, a pregnant woman, you can't file taxes on behalf, if you're pregnant for 2 people, you're still 1 person filing taxes. But for TennCare, the woman plus the number of children she is expected to have is her household plus any other people. So if a woman's pregnant with twins, she's already got a household of 3. But that only counts toward her household size. If she's got, woman's pregnant, she already has 1 kid, nobody else in the household, that kid's household is going to be 2, mom and child. Mom's household is going to be 3, child, mom, and baby. Okay, so that's a lot of information to throw at you, so we're going to work through some of the scenarios to see how these work in real life. Okay, Deacon, if anybody remembers Deacon, he's a loner type, and he lives alone, of course. He's not claimed as a dependent on anyone else's tax returns. He has no tax dependents. For Medicaid, his household size is, of course, 1. Easy enough. here we've got 4 people. We've got country superstar Raina James, former mayor of Nashville Teddy Conrad, and their 2 kids, Maddie and Daphne. They are married. They file a joint tax return claiming both children as dependents. And remember, everybody has a different household size. You have to calculate the dependent for each of them. In this case, they're all the same. What's the answer? 4. Joint tax return, no exceptions, parents, spouses, children, siblings living together, 4. Okay, now things get more interesting. Sad day, Teddy and Raina divorce. Raina lives with both daughters, but she files taxes just for herself. Teddy, who lives apart, claims the girls as tax dependents, but they don't live with him. What is Raina's household size? Raina's the mom. Somebody said it. 1, she's a tax filer. So her household size is going to be always a tax filing unit. If she's the only person on her tax return, that's her household size, even though she lives with the kids. Now, Maddie and Daphne, the 2 kids, what's their household size and who counts in it? 3, who's in it?
The other sister and the father.
Who thinks the household includes the mother? Who thinks the household includes the father? It's the mother. They're claimed by a non-custodial parent, but that's one of the exceptions. So you don't look at the tax filing unit because of that exception. You look at who they live with. They live with their mother and a sibling each. So they're both in a household of 3, the same household of 3. Now what's Teddy's household? They're in the mom's household, right? What's Teddy's household? 3. For purposes of Maddie and Daphne's, they can be in Raina's household, but for Teddy's purposes, they're in his household. He's in a household of 3. They're in a household of 3. They're different households of 3. Now, let's see what happens if you change the tax filing, the way taxes are filed. Raina still lives with both daughters. She claims one of the kids is a tax dependent. Teddy claims the other kid is a tax dependent. Raina claims Maddie. Teddy claims Daphne. Who's in Raina's household? Raina and Maddie. Easy enough. Raina is the tax filer. Her tax, so she claims Maddie on her tax return. That's 2. Who's in Maddie's household? So if you said it's Raina, Maddie, and Daphne, that would mean there is some exception to the general rule that as a tax dependent, you're in the tax filing unit. Does Maddie have any exceptions to that? She lives with her mom. Is her mom claiming her? She's in a household of 2 as well. There's no exception, so it's a tax filing unit. None of those 3 exceptions apply to Maddie. They do apply to Daphne. So who's in Daphne's household? Daphne, remember, is claimed by Teddy.
Maddie and Daphne and Teddy.
Generally, so they're tax dependents. That would be the household, it would be the tax filing unit unless an exception applies. If Teddy doesn't live with them, that's a non-custodial parent claiming her. Therefore, you don't look at the tax filing unit anymore. You look at the household unit. And then Teddy, who's in Teddy's? Teddy and Daphne, household of 2. Okay, see, this can get complicated pretty quickly. Now, what about a 3-generation household? The other country superstar, Juliette Barnes, she lives with her 44-year-old mother, Jolene, and her 1-year-old daughter, who on the show's name is Cadence, by the way. We didn't name her on the slide. Juliette, who's the middle one, I mean, not the middle picture, obviously, but the middle age person. She is a tax filer and she claims her mom and her daughter on her taxes. What is Juliet's household size for Medicaid purposes? What's her tax filing status? Well, I mean, what not single. There's only 3 statuses, remember. She's a tax filer, not non-dependent tax filer. So what's the rule always for them?
People claim on their taxes.
Yes, they're tax filing unit. She claims them all her taxes. She's the filer. They're in her household, period, always. So the tax filer, again, tax filer, it's always going to be that household. Now, Jolene, the mom, the grandmom of the baby, the mom of Juliet, what is she? She's a dependent non-filer. So how many people in her household? How many people think 3? Who wants to tell them why they're wrong? I heard the right answer here. Do you know why they're wrong? Okay. Jolene is dependent, so the default would be the tax filing unit, so it'd be 3. Does she fall into any exceptions? What was the first exception? She's not claimed by a child or a spouse. And by a parent or a spouse, sorry. And Juliet doesn't, for any of these purposes, Juliet is not going to count as her daughter. But it wouldn't make any difference if she was here. So Jolene is an exception. The person claiming her on the taxes is not her parent or her spouse. Therefore, you look at the household size. Who is in her household? It's parents, minor children, and minor siblings living together. She's in a household of 1. And Cadence, the 1-year-old, is in her household. She's a tax dependent. Do any exceptions apply? Is she being claimed by a parent or spouse?
Yes.
Yes. Is she being claimed by a non-custodial parent? There's no issue of unmarried parents here who are filing and who live together, so 3. Okay, questions on that? All perfectly clear? Just remember, yeah.
So you were talking about those 3 exceptions, like tax dependent is not a minor child or a spouse. So if it falls under one of those exceptions, then what does it revert back to?
So the default rule is the tax filing unit.
Okay.
If it's not, if an exception, if one of those 3 exceptions applies, it goes to the parents, children, spouses, minor siblings, minor children, all
so
that who live together. Right. Because her parents, she doesn't have a spouse, a minor sibling.
Right.
And so the granddaughter wouldn't count in that case. That's not in her household. And why doesn't Juliet count in Jolene's household?
She's
Not a minor child. Okay, so for non-MAGI categories, this is primarily the medically needy spend down. The major difference is step everything is excluded. Step parents, siblings, children are never included in the household with the person you're looking at. Now, for this category, does anybody know who's eligible for this? It's only children, pregnant women are the only people eligible for this category anyway. So for adults, you would exclude any stepchildren if you're looking to get a pregnant woman eligible, or for children, exclude step parents and minor siblings, minor step siblings. And also, if anyone for medically needy spend down purposes, if anyone in the household is receiving SSI, they're not counted as part of the household. Neither them nor their SSI income counts in the household. And finally, ABD counting. What does ABD stand for? Age of blind disabled. I'm not going to go into detail on these because the rules themselves are an utter mess. I mean, it is really, TennCare's own rules make very little sense. Their policy manual makes even less sense. So generally, under the ABD categories, household is always going to be either 1 or 2, even though the TennCare policy manual suggests that there could be more than that. But as a general rule, it should only be 1 or 2. And it will only be 2, and here's where the complication gets in, because they're based on SSI rules. Under SSI rules, it's only a household of 2 if both people are receiving SSI. For these categories, which are rooted in SSI but are not directly based on those rules, except for the basic SSI eligibility category, they have drawn on those SSI rules and modeled them after them. But for example, it's unclear what the other spouse needs to be eligible for to count them as a household of 2. We've argued different depending on what's best for our clients. If we're trying to get them, say, both eligible for Medicare savings program, we'll, if it helps the client for them to be in a household of 2, we'll say they're in a household of 2. They're both eligible for Medicare savings program. If we need them to both be, if it would help them to say they're a household of 2 because they both receive SSI, even if we're not looking at that, that's not going to come up really. But the big thing that goes on here is there is a whole formula for deeming income. So if there are other household members who have income, they don't count as part of the household, but there's a formula for how much of their income gets counted in that household. It's very complicated, and again, the rules themselves don't make a lot of sense. If you run into a knotty one here, feel free to give me a call. Okay, quick sidebar. Social Security. Lots of these income issues, you run up against Social Security and you figure out, for example, is this person getting SSI or SSDI or Social Security retirement? What are they getting? A reminder, SSI is for low-income people who are over 65 or have a disability. It's not subject to income tax, and they have to make under $735 for individuals, $1,100 for couples. Again, if there's only 1 or 2. And you automatically get TennCare when you get SSI. For SSDI, Social Security disability, under 65, or based on someone's work history. So SSI, you don't have to have a work history to get SSI. You have to have a disability, meet immigration status requirements, and make under 735. For SSDI, you have to have a work history. You have to have worked a certain number of quarters, or a parent or a spouse can work a certain number of quarters. It doesn't automatically come with TennCare. You can get Medicare 2 years after the onset of the disability. How do people know? Lots of people say, I'm on disability. And they might mean SSI, they might mean SSDI. Always remember, ask them what day of the month they get their check on. SSI is always paid on the first day of the month, or the first banking day if it's a Sunday or holiday. If SSDI, if they started getting it after 1977, it's paid on the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th of the month. If it's before 1977, it's always on the 3rd day of the month. So if they don't get paid on the 1st of the month, it's SSDI. Or if their check is greater than $735, it's SSDI. So this is what I said. If it's over 735, it is almost certainly not SSI. Or if they get it on the 1st of the month, it is SSI. Questions?
The SSI income limit, 735, is that for 2017 or is that current? Is that 2018?
I may not have it updated. Does anybody know what
it's 750 this year.
It's 750 this year? Okay, yes, ignore that slide. I will correct it next time. Any other questions? Okay, now we figured out how to figure out whose income counts. We know who's in the household. Household income is going to be everybody who's included in the household. What's their income? And does that income count? Now, I've already told you one rule about this. Can somebody name somebody who would be counted in a household, but whose income, even if they have it, would not count? For MAGI.
Minor paying taxes that doesn't have.
Exactly. If the person does not make enough to be required to file taxes, doesn't have to be a minor, it can be anybody, but if they're not making enough to have to file taxes, that income does not count. So it only reaches countable until it reaches the taxable threshold. It doesn't count. So basically, if it's money coming in, it's income as a general rule. So, but there are lots of exceptions. So it's considered taxable income unless there's a specific exclusion for it. So for MAGI, it's based on, again, the word is modified adjusted gross income. Federal taxation, your IRS is based on your adjusted gross income. So this is the M is it's the slight change from adjusted gross income, which would be on someone's tax returns, I'll give away the game. Basically, any non-taxable Social Security, you add back into the income, to the adjusted gross income, or any foreign income, you add back in. That second one is rarely going to be relevant for many of our clients, but the Social Security, the non-taxable Social Security, you add that income back in. There's also under MAGI, there is no asset or resource test. So doesn't matter how much anyone has in the bank, if they're a child, pregnant woman, parent or caretaker relative, it's only about their income. And that income, there used to be lots of disregard. So you could disregard different amounts for childcare, for earned income, things like that. They've done away with that. There's a uniform 5% disregard. It only really kicks in if someone would, this doesn't make a lot of sense, but this is the way the rules were written. You only include that 5% disregard if the person would be ineligible without it. Not sure why you would consider it if that wasn't the case, but it seems like a redundant rule to me. So earned income, step one, you got to figure out gross income before we start doing these deductions to adjust and to modify it. So wages, salaries, tips, so anything on a W-2, self-employment, so business, farm income after the deductions of business expenses, or independent contractors, so basically the things that count as income for self-employed people. And then there's lots of unearned income, dividends, Social Security, the taxable amount of Social Security, which itself is a complicated formula, IRA, taxable state income tax refunds, alimony received, unemployment, prizes, jury duty pay, all of that's unearned income. But then there's lots of exceptions, things that you take out. All of these IRA deductions, I think I've got them listed, yeah. So you take that gross income, everything that comes in, and then you deduct. Some of these are capped, but you can set it like a limit for educator expenses at $250 a year. More deductions, alimony paid can be a deduction, student loan interest with limits, tuition and fees with limits. Now, to get from adjusted, and that gives you your adjusted gross income. You take the gross income and then all the deductions that you can get. This is what's going to be on the tax return. Once you get that adjusted gross income, and by the way, there should be a toolkit. Did everybody get a copy of the toolkit? All of this is in there. There's a list of most of these deductions in there on page 4. Then to get from adjusted gross income back to MAGI, and you just add tax exempt interest, foreign income, and non-taxable Social Security benefits. This is always the big one. So basically all Social Security benefits except SSI are included in the MAGI calculation. So that's the main takeaway here is you ask somebody, well, what did you pay on your taxes last year? Do you get Social Security? You actually made more than you probably paid taxes on. Or your MAGI is more than what you pay taxes on. So for MAGI purposes, remember the household income is going to be the MAGI income of every person in the household. Except again, oh, here's the threshold. Or at least this may be a last year thing. I don't know if I updated this or not. Excuse me. So anybody who makes those, their income's not going to count. It's coming back. Okay, so let's try one. Income of tax dependents. Raina, remember it's Raina, her kids, Maddie and Daphne. They make $3,050 apiece for playing at an award show. Is this income part of the household's MAGI? Let me ask it this way. I'll give you A, B, or C answers. A is yes, B is no, C is more information is needed. More information is needed. So one, there's the question of how much more did they make? Is that all they made that year? How is this going to be reported as, are they going to pay taxes on it? You know, if that's all they made, is that above the deduction amount? Yeah, so if that's all they made, then it wouldn't count. But you need to know if they made other income that year to figure out if it rises to the taxable level. Okay, a few just gray areas where there's some, where you may end up having to make complicated arguments in an appeal. As a general rule, government benefits that are based on need are not taxable. So SSI, veterans benefits, cash assistance, Families First, SNAP, housing assistance, LIHEAP, energy and utility assistance. None of those are going to be taxable. Remember, Social Security, even though SSI is administered by Social Security, it's not considered a Social Security benefit. Remember the SSI, what does SS and SSI stand for? Supplemental Security Income, not Social Security. Since these Title II Social Security are not needs-based programs, they're based on work history. So you got the different types. There's also a railroad benefit, I think. Isn't there one more? So just remember that those Social Security benefits are added back in for MAGI purposes. Life insurance proceeds. Lump sum paid to the beneficiary are usually not considered income for life insurance proceeds. Gifts and inheritances of money or property, not considered income to the recipient. And there is sometimes you do have to pay taxes as a gift receipt, as a recipient of a gift, but it's up to $14,000 for 2017 without triggering that taxation for that. Unemployment, all your unemployment benefits are taxable. Workers' compensation is not taxable. Child support, the payor can't deduct the payments. The recipient, it is not taxable income. So basically, the payer of child support pays taxes on that money before it's paid, so it doesn't get double paid, double taxed. For alimony, the payor can deduct it, and it is taxable for the recipient. Okay. Lamar, senator, retired senator from Tennessee. He's 62. In 2012, he had a stroke and began getting SSDI. It's $900 a month in SSDI. He has $1,200 in savings. He receives $600 a month in royalties from his deceased wife's records. He pays $150 a month in child support for a yet-to-be disclosed child. And he received a one-time gift of $1,100 from Raina. What's his MAGI? So first, what counts as income? Is there anything on here that you know is not going to count as income? SSDI? SSDI is going to count for his MAGI. Remember, you add back any Social Security payments you add back in for the MAGI.
Does it not count as income?
As income.
The child support?
But yes. So $1,200 in savings. The money he pays in child support is not deducted, doesn't matter. It's still income to him, whatever he spends it on doesn't count. And that one-time gift doesn't count because it's not enough to rise to the level of the gift tax. So his MAGI is only that $900 a month from SSDI and $600 in royalties. So he gets $18,000 a year. Okay, just a couple of reminders. Only count income if they're required to file taxes. Check some exceptions. There are a few little exceptions on when people who make almost nothing may still be required to file taxes. Remember, no resource tests for MAGI. For TennCare or premium tax credits, TennCare is always based on the month of application. What was your income for the month of application? For premium tax credits, it's based on your estimated annual income. And I think I have a slide on this, but let me mention it if I can't recall if I have a slide. If I don't, can somebody remind me to come back to the gap filling rule? I think it's on here, but the gap filling rule is if someone, because of this difference, if you're looking at a MAGI category, and in the month of application, someone makes more than the eligibility threshold for whatever category they're applying in. So let's say you got a parent, they're applying the month of application, they're over income. But their annual income would put them below the federal poverty level. So you've got someone with fluctuating income, their annual income would be below the federal poverty level. In that case, the person is still eligible for Medicaid. What they don't want is, because of the difference in monthly counting rules versus annual counting rules, they don't want somebody who, especially in a non-expansion state, to be in the coverage gap simply because they've got this issue of they're not eligible for Medicaid and they're not eligible for premium tax credits because of the difference between monthly counting and yearly counting. I think I've got a better slide on that. Sure. Questions? Am I going too slow for everybody? Speed up a little. Okay, medically needy spend down. How many people don't know anything about medically needy spend down? Okay. Medically needy spend down is a program for people whose income is too high to be eligible for Medicaid, but they have really high medical bills. Their spend down is a way to take those medical bills and deduct from your income until you reach a lower threshold level that you can still be eligible. Today, only pregnant women and children are eligible for medically needy spend down. And I'm going to tell you how it works in a second. But used to be there was medically needy spend down for other people, but now it's just pregnant women and children. So the household income is the sum of every individual in the budget group. The budget group is everybody except the step siblings. So parents, children, blood siblings, and blood parents, unless somebody receives SSI and that person is not included. Household income is everybody else. There are a few differences in what counts. So like step parents don't count, child support doesn't count, gifts and inheritances don't count, all of that stuff. So there's child support. It's not that it all doesn't count. There's a $50 disregard per family for the receipt of child support. For MAGI, that's different than MAGI. MAGI, it's just not income to the recipient. Here it is income, but you get to disregard $50 of it for medically needy spend down. And a lot of this stuff, just an aside, I don't think everybody's going to remember this. What you might remember is you got an issue in front of you. You're like, oh, I remember Chris said something about child support under medically needy spend down or something like that. This is really sort of a red flags, catch all the red flags. Gifts and inheritances, it's income in the month it's received, and then it becomes a resource later. And medically needy spend down does have a resource test. Life insurance proceeds are income in the month that it's received, but some of that can be used for other expenses and therefore not count. Again, for MAGI, generally that's not going to be taxable and therefore not part of the MAGI. VA, it really depends on the nature of the payment. There's lots of different VA benefits. If it's based on need, then it's not going to be included. If it's just a veteran's pension, something like that, then that is going to be included. And then minor's income, or the rule for MAGI is only if they're required to pay taxes. For this category, for medically needy spend down, full-time student, you disregard their income. If not a full-time student, you can disregard 6 months of the income. And there's no deeming of income from one child to another. So if one child gets income, that income is not going to count against another child in the household. There's a couple of exceptions, but step parents are not going to count. So here they all on one page. Generally doesn't count. Is the minor a full-time student? These are your red flags to look up if you see any of these come across.
I have a question.
Yep.
Is there a circumstance where step parent income could count? Say generally, that makes me wonder if there's an exception out there.
Trying to remember why I included generally on here. Nothing comes to mind right now. Does anybody know any of the? Rachel. So I would assume that the income doesn't count, but if there's a problem, look it up and see if there's some exception to it. I don't think there is, and I don't know why I put generally. Okay, again, exceptions to the income counting rules. These are categories. I said there was just one exception to where you don't need income at all. I was kind of wrong about that. These are separate or no income counting rules. There are no income counting rules technically for newborns if the mom is on TennCare. The reason for that is obvious, which is the child is going to be under income for the newborn category because the income level is higher than for pregnant women. So if the mom is on, the child is definitely going to be eligible. I mentioned former foster care youth. They're eligible for TennCare until they get 26. As long as they age out of foster care, and there was a state option. Tennessee, of course, chose the stingier option, which was they have to have aged out of foster care in Tennessee. If they aged out in any other state, we could have offered them TennCare, but we decided not to. And then there's separate income counting rules for the breast and cervical cancer treatment program. That's done at the Department of Health. I'm going to leave that aside. Resources. So for MAGI, what's the resource limit for MAGI? There are none. Doesn't matter what your resources are. For other categories, there is a resource limit. And resources, assets, savings, things I own, basically anything other than money you're getting every month. Countable liquid, non-liquid, or some other specific things. Cash that you've got on hand, any bank accounts, trust funds, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, all of that kind of stuff is going to be a resource. Also, real property, cars, trucks, personal items, and insurance policies. Any insurance policy that would be redeemable for a cash value. Burial resources, if they are redeemable, or other income producing resources. MAGI, there are none, easy enough. Medically needy spend down, these are the limits. So depending on the household size, these are the resource limits. The homestead and one car does not count, and that's the most expensive car that doesn't count. Cars, I think the argument should be made. I don't think there's a specific rule on this. I could be wrong. Cars, you take what's owed on the car and the Kelly Blue Book value, and that is the difference between that is what the asset is worth. So if somebody's upside down on it, the car is worth nothing, and they still owe $1,000 on it, that's not going to count as a resource. It's about to make another point about resources. What was it? Help me. Oh, it'll come to me. Okay, so that's the basics of all of the household size and the way finances are counted. I'm going to move now to the different categories of TennCare, but let's pause there for a second and see if there are any questions on any of that. What's countable, what's not countable, assets, resources, income, MAGI.
So, let's say that when they applied, they were over assets, but then they spend down. If they're in the process of, like, TennCare comes back and says, okay, you're not eligible because you're over assets, but you've now spent it down, can you show TennCare, look, I don't have that in assets anymore, or do you have to reapply?
For choices, you shouldn't have to reapply. For choices, they will tell you how much over, generally, will tell you, here's how much you have to spend down. On regular TennCare, you have to be eligible in the month that you apply.
Okay.
So
what if you're not eligible? Okay, you apply like on, like they just, we told them to apply, but we realized they were over assets. And so they went on the weekend and spent it down. And so I'm, thinking they're going to come back and say you're not eligible. It was a DAC, and I think they're going to say they're not eligible because they don't know that they're a DAC, but they are eligible, but they are over resources, but now not. So should I just tell them to go and reapply again now that they're below assets, or will it go back to, can we say, look, they are now, even though they weren't the day that they applied?
it was a redetermination or an initial application?
It's redetermination, but we also were covering bases because they redetermined them like a year ago and then sent them a letter saying, oh, you're not eligible a year later because they're just now looking at the application.
Right.
And we're saying, yeah, they're eligible, they're DAC, but now I know that he had too much in the bank account. He had like, I think it was 2,000, and he's got more than that. So
yeah, I think it depends on if there were any medical bills incurred in the interim between.
They went and bought a TV.
If they're usually the only reason to worry about should someone apply again or stick with an older application or a redetermination packet or something like that is if there are medical bills in the interim. The fastest way usually to get, if somebody's eligible right now, I think just reapplying is the easiest way to do it.
All right.
The only reason ever to work for back coverage is if there's bills that need to be
I don't
covered.
think we have any bills. Yeah. Okay.
Other question on those? Okay.
And it doesn't matter what they spend it on, right? They don't have to have.
As long as it's, for. Yeah, as long as it's not transfer for less than fair market value, so they can't give it away.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if they even do the look back for assets on TennCare, because now that MAGI, all of that is choices. They definitely do that in choices, yes. But I haven't run into it in any of the TennCare asset rules. Okay, let me. Okay, Tennessee remains the only state that requires nearly all applicants to apply, not through their local DHS office, some county office where real people work, or any state of Tennessee website, or any state of Tennessee phone number or fax machine. Everybody has to apply through the federal marketplace. So Tennesseans applying for TennCare have to apply through the federal government to do that. And that's because of the failure of the TED system, the TennCare Eligibility Determination System, which was supposed to be completed in October of 2013. Projected finish date as of now is by the end of 2018. So They're working real hard to get it done. And by the way, we've heard, I've not heard confirmation from TennCare from this, but we've heard from reliable people that they have stopped doing redetermination for choices and maybe for all categories for new redeterminations until TEDS gets up and running. So please keep an eye on that. If you're still seeing redeterminations, we need to go back through our sources to figure out where they heard that. But we think there may be some stop to redeterminations until later in the year. But we still have to go through healthcare.gov. The only things that you can apply directly to the state for are presumptive eligibility, all of these I'll talk about, for choices and for the Medicare savings programs. And presumptive eligibility is only for children, women with breast and cervical cancer, or newborns. There are hospitals that are supposedly doing hospital presumptive eligibility for other categories. If that's happening, we're not seeing it. I think TennCare made the requirement so strict on the hospitals that a lot of hospitals are not participating in it. Timeline, disability. If you're applying for a MAGI category, TennCare has 45 days to get you an answer. Once you submit that application, they have to give you an answer in 45 days. If not, they have to give you an appeal, a right to a fair hearing. Please, 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 if you have a client who has been delayed more than 45 days or 90 days for choices, file an appeal. Please file an appeal. We're going to trial in October on our Wilson case, which is the class action about delays in TennCare. We need to make sure people who are experiencing delays file appeals. You can look up how to file, I've been TennCare delay appeal or something like that on Google that and you'll find it. But please do file those. Basic question, but like I said in the first thing, along with tax filing status, the other thing that you look at when somebody's right there in front of you, you say, who is this person? What's their category? Because we're looking at categorical eligibility. Everybody has to fall into a category. What happens if you don't fall into a category? Let's say you make no money, you have zero income, and you don't fall into a category. You're out of luck. You're not eligible. What's the cause of that? Not expanding Medicaid. Just want to make sure everybody knows that.
It's your fault, Chris.
Yeah. But when clients call and they say, I can't get TennCare, they said I'm not eligible. If they're not eligible because they're in a gap, tell them whose fault it is. You want to complain, call your legislators. Tell them, complain to them. I know I don't know if y'all can even tell them that, but I don't think you can. Well, you can tell them whose fault. You can give information. And you can give them the information of it's your legislator's fault and the information of you can call your legislator. That's not encouraging them to do anything, I don't think. I'd find you innocent. So the MAGI categories are children. Children, there should not be any case of a child who is not eligible for anything except who are undocumented immigrants or immigrants who have been in the country for less than 5 years. Every other child should be eligible for something. For kids, the three categories, in addition to marketplace coverage, would be regular Medicaid, Cover Kids, and then TennCare Standard. I'll go through each of those. These are updated numbers, I know. So children, depends on their age, what the income limit is. All this is in the toolkit. I'm just showing you for visual effect now. Kids under 1, it's a pretty good income there. So lots of kids should be eligible, especially under 1, and it goes up to 138. The reason it's 138 is something that I call the mini Medicaid expansion that nobody knows about and wasn't challenged in court, but it used to be 100% here. But because of the ACA, they made everybody lift children's eligibility to 138, and that survived in FIB versus Spalius, where the Supreme Court struck down the Medicaid expansion, or the requirement of Medicaid expansion. But they didn't strike this down, so it's still 138 there for kids 6 to 18. Cover Kids, it's for slightly higher income. Kids under 19 can get coverage through Cover Kids, except they cannot be enrolled in another health plan. You cannot have Cover Kids as a secondary insurance. And for Cover Kids, just like for TennCare, you have to apply through the marketplace. And just so you know, Cover Kids does have some additional out-of-pocket expenses that TennCare doesn't have, and a slightly more limited service package than TennCare has. But if it's, so I generally want to try to get my clients on TennCare if they're eligible for it rather than Cover Kids, but this may be all they're eligible for. There's, as I was saying. And then there's TennCare Standard. TennCare Standard, so children who are under 19 who are already on TennCare, if they're redetermined and found ineligible, in certain circumstances, they can, what's generally referred to as roll over into TennCare Standard. As long as their income stays, the household income stays below 212%. So let's say they're at 138%, mom gets a raise, they were eligible there, they can stay on through TennCare Standard. It's a slightly different benefits package. It's technically not even Medicaid, but it is Medicaid, it's TennCare. Or if they have a qualifying health condition. This is a remnant of the pre-ACA days where this was mainly for people losing TennCare who were not going to be able to get insurance at all in the private market because of pre-existing conditions. So there is supposed to be a list somewhere on TennCare's website. I've not looked for it recently. It's very hard to find, but there are conditions that will qualify you for TennCare Standard. The important thing to remember is if a kid rolls off, if there's redetermination, they said the kid's not eligible, but the kid doesn't have access to any employer-sponsored insurance through a parent, and their income stays below 212, or the kid has some sort of serious diabetes, things like that, or definitely much more serious, they should roll over on TennCare Standard, appeal it, and you should be able to get it. Newborns. First is TennCare deeming. Mom's on TennCare, child is deemed eligible for TennCare for 1 year. Coverage starts on the date of birth. Mom just needs to call TennCare, say, hey, I'm so-and-so. They look them up in the system. They say, I just had a baby. Baby's name's X. Child should be put on TennCare immediately. It should not be a problem. If it is a problem, please let us know.
What if mom is not on TennCare? She has insurance through her parents.
Oh.
Okay.
So if the mom is on Cover Kids, the child is deemed eligible for Cover Kids, but there the coverage starts on the date that the mother enrolled in Cover Kids. So this is going to happen. Pregnant women are also eligible for Cover Kids. I'll mention that in the pregnant section next. And also pregnant women who are in the 5-year bar or who are undocumented are eligible for Cover Kids to cover their maternity. So that's going to be a situation you're going to find lots of kids who are eligible for Cover Kids, or if they're eligible for TennCare, they're supposed to be placed in the proper program if they're only eligible for Cover Kids. But the automatic deeming is to Cover Kids. Call Cover Kids, report the birth. You can do that at Tennessee Health Connection too. The theory here and why they can cover undocumented mothers, again, I'm talking about Cover Kids deeming and skipping way ahead. I'll wait to tell you that. The big difference that I was going to say, I'll go back to it. It starts from the date the mom enrolled. That's because of the theory is that they're not actually covering the mom. They're only covering the child that's going to be born. So it starts from the date the mom enrolls and lasts a year for Cover Kids. While TennCare deeming starts the date of birth and lasts a year from the date of birth, even if the mom's been on TennCare for years. And then there's newborn presumptive eligibility. This is the answer to the question about what if the mom is on private insurance or doesn't have insurance. There is a presumptive eligibility program. You can call Tennessee Health Connection. Hospitals are supposed to be doing this. Many of them don't, but you should be able to call Tennessee Health Connection if the hospital doesn't do it. Just report everything and they will give presumptive eligibility. The one important thing is you only get presumptive eligibility for a total of 62 days unless you have put in a full marketplace application for full TennCare benefits within that 62 days. So you have to apply, if you get presumptive eligibility, you have to apply in the marketplace.
So she contacted her healthcare and maybe Blue Care. She contacted Blue Care and they said, no, you have to, or she got the runaround. So eventually, so she didn't apply. When she finally applied through the marketplace, when they told her that that's what she needed to do, it was not the date that the baby was born. And so there's the coverage. Yeah.
I would argue if she if she has proof of calling the MCO,
Calling her, the MCO, like, I mean, I guess she wasn't on TennCare, she was on her parents' insurance. So when you say the MCO, like calling her insurance is not gonna be sufficient.
if it's not 10, I mean,
Well,
if it's not 10.
yeah, I mean, that was the confusing part. So I need to see if she called it an MCO that deals with TennCare, because then the argument could be that that's, you know, the day the baby was born, and they should.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that she has a right to apply. If she called TennCare or any of its contractors, that was an attempt to apply, that they should have facilitated
Okay.
the enrollment or sent them to the right place on that date. And if they didn't do that, as agents of TennCare, they violated the right to apply.
Okay. So with.
So why would she be eligible? She has insurance.
The mother has insurance through the parent.
That would cover the birth.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, if her insurance, but I don't know, you know, her insurance will cover the baby for 30 days. Because some insurances do that. And what, you know, whether she needs TennCare, but she's getting this bill and TennCare saying, we're not going back to the day of the birth because you didn't apply until 15 days later. And that's when she said she got the runaround, she called one place, they said, call here, and then eventually she did make that application at the marketplace, but it wasn't the day.
I mean, so there's a principle in the Affordable Care Act called no wrong door, which says there's a single application for Medicaid, for Cover Kids, and for Marketplace for tax credits and cost sharing reductions through the Marketplace. It's all the same application. And anywhere you put that in the system, either with the state Medicaid agency, with the state CHIP agency, or with the Marketplace, that's all you have to do. And I would argue that as part of no wrong door, if you try to apply, if you call your TennCare MCO or call a TennCare MCO and say, how do I apply?
Yeah.
They're supposed to tell you how to apply. They can't say, go somewhere else. I mean, they probably will, but I would make the argument in hearing anyway. Yeah, you can enroll the kid for newborn presumptive eligibility, you can enroll them through Tennessee Health Connection if the hospital doesn't do it. But remember, you have to still do a Marketplace application. If that Marketplace application is submitted, the child should remain eligible even past the 62 days until there's a final determination on their application. There should not ever be a case where somebody has presumptive eligibility and has completed a Marketplace application and then they lose their coverage before there's an adjudication. Child might be eligible for TennCare even if the mom was on Cover Kids, and there should be no gap in coverage between the date of birth and the date of effective TennCare coverage for these deeming situations. If the mom was eligible, the reason is because some women are on Cover Kids not because they're over income for TennCare, but because their immigration status makes them eligible for TennCare. So the kid's income still might be below the TennCare eligibility threshold. That's children. Pregnant women, TennCare Medicaid, presumptive eligibility for pregnant women, and Cover Kids. Pregnant women, it's 200% of the federal poverty level. Again, pregnant. Why don't I have a 1 here? A household size of 1. Pregnant women is never going to be in a household of 1. She will always be at least in a household of 2. That's because she's pregnant. But remember that child, the soon-to-be born child, does not count in the household of anybody else in the household. Women can go to the local health department to get presumptive eligibility. You have to apply through, again, just like with the presumptive eligibility for kids, for the newborn presumptive eligibility, you have to apply through the Marketplace before, and I say here, it's the 62 days, TennCare keeps shifting the way they do it. Initially, it was by the end of the month following the month in which you got presumptive eligibility. So if you applied on September 1st or September 30th, you were always going to lose at the end of October. The federal rules say 45 days, I guess they felt that that was too difficult, so they automatically put 62 days in. That's 2 months of 31 days. And again, should continue until there's an eligibility determination. Cover kids, just higher income, but again, cover kids, you can't have other maternity coverage to get on cover kids, but for cover kids for pregnant women, eligibility is not an issue. I mean, immigration status is not an issue. So undocumented pregnant women are eligible, and it goes 60 days postpartum. And about 3 years ago, it used to be that cover kids would only cover maternity related services. So let's say pregnant mom broke her arm, she would be uninsured for those purposes. I think finally, both through fights probably with some of you here and with us, when we said, well, if she's got pneumonia and she's in the hospital, that could very well affect the baby. So that should be covered as maternity service. I think once you start getting into medical proof as to whether something's covered or not, they're just like, we'll cover everything. It's easier to administer for them, for this population. So it is full coverage, even though they only have to have access to maternity. They can't have access to other maternity coverage. Parents and caretaker relatives. There are 2 categories here. One is just your basic parents and caretaker relatives category, the MAGI category. Then there's transitional TennCare. And remember back in the slide about household size, the question of whether someone counts in your household is different than the question of whether you are a parent or caretaker relative for purposes of categorical eligibility. There it's got to be children under 18 or 18 if it's a full-time student living at home. Remember, they could be up to 24 or up to 21 or 20 for a marketplace, for them to count in the household, even though the parent still would not be eligible at 20 as parent or caretaker relative. Caretaker relative can be any relative who provides primary care for the child. Has anybody had any fights over whether someone was the caretaker relative or not? I mean, they tend not to question it very much. I haven't either. So,
I had a case a long time ago where it was divorced parents with 50-50 custody, and I can't remember how to do
that's supposed to be where they spend the most nights.
Right. I think we
And parents have to apply through the marketplace. The parents and caretaker relatives, this income is not based on the federal poverty level, and there is some confusion as to what the income level actually is. It is the way this is set has to do with what the eligibility threshold was in 1996 when the PROARA was passed, and a formula for that. The marketplace, though, to apply through the marketplace, they have to put a percentage in because the marketplace can't do it correctly. And since you can't apply for TennCare with any state-based computer, so these are rough estimates, and it's unclear what the marketplace is using. And if you get denied through the marketplace, if they will then use a different number when TennCare is reviewing it, it's kind of a mess. If you run into problems there, please let me know because it's something we need to address, because it's all a result of their inability to get their own computer system. Then transitional TennCare. Low-income families who lose TennCare because of income. So they get increase in their income. Mom gets a raise, something happens like that. If that mom or dad or parent or caretaker relative were covered by TennCare for at least 3 of the last 6 months and their income remains below 185% of the federal poverty level, they get to keep TennCare for up to 12 months after that. And both this, sort of like TennCare standard, we don't want to avoid income cliffs where if somebody makes $1 more, they completely lose everything. This is, to incentivize families to, okay, you can take the raise, you can take the new job without facing immediate loss of all your health coverage. So as long as you're below 185 and have been on TennCare, then you get to keep it. Non-MAGI and ABD categories, as I said, medically needy spend down covers children up to age 21. So here we've got another definition of child. There's children's eligibility, there's how old a child is for parent, caretaker, relative. There's household. Medically needed spend down is up to age 21, and pregnant women who have high medical expenses. You have to apply through the marketplace. Medically needy spend down is they're never going to, I've not ever seen a case that we did not have to appeal to get medically needy spend down, because the marketplace only screens for MAGI categories. So marketplace is just going to deny people because their income is too high. On the marketplace, there is a way to push through the application for a full Medicaid screening. It's supposed to work. There's a couple of categories that it just never works for. DAC is another one, which I'll talk about in a second. So medically needed spend down, you take all of that income and then you subtract the qualifying medical expenses, and you have to get the income down to these levels, which is pretty low. So people have to have pretty substantial expenses, but their income can be pretty high if they have really high expenses. So just to give you a quick example, there's a monthly income for a household of two of $3,500, and they need to get down to this $258. So they're going to need $3,242 in medical bills. And those bills can be incurred in the month of application or in the 3 previous months. Or if they were incurred even later than that and were paid during the month of application, they also count. And this is bills for anybody in the family. So if there's an application put in at the beginning of the month, if they can reach that spend down by the end of the month, they become eligible on the date that they meet spend down. And there are lots of fancy ways that if you schedule things correctly, that you can both incur the spend down expenses and get covered on the same day. If anybody wants help with that, Jane Beasley at TJC is a master at this sort of shell game of getting people covered through spend down, but then getting those bills covered because they became eligible for TennCare on the same day. And not only do bills from the whole family count, if you've got, let's say, one kid, let's say the family has 3 kids, there's one kid with really high medical expenses and they're trying to spend down for them. Once they spend down for that kid, all the kids in the family become eligible.
Just the kids and not the parents.
Well, unless it's a pregnant woman.
Right. Okay.
So if the mom's pregnant, she becomes eligible too. But yeah, but it's only people eligible in this category are the kids or pregnant women. So things that count, bills, any health insurance premiums by anybody in the family. So let's say dad has an employer-sponsored insurance, but he has to pay part of the premium. That counts for 4 months. Transportation at 47 cents a mile. Over-the-counter meds, vision, dental, hearing, medical equipment, supplies. These are even for things like adult vision. So that wouldn't be covered by TennCare, but you can still use that bill to subtract down for your spend down expenses. There is, though, a resource limit. So you run into the problem most often with spend down of, this family is already over income for TennCare. They've got high medical bills, but often that being over income means they've also got something in the bank. They've got a 401k. They've got other resources that are going to count against them. So they've got to get down the resources as well. And that's the place where we run into the most hurdles getting people eligible, is not on the income side. Again, click if you're helping someone apply, or if you're recommending, telling somebody to go try to apply for this. At the end of the screening, there should be a full Medicaid determination. Send to Medicaid. That's trying to push it through to say, we're going to send this from the marketplace back to your state agency to review for it. And for this, the best thing, if you get the denial form on the marketplace, it says you're not eligible for TennCare, just go ahead and appeal, take that screenshot or print it out and send it in with an appeal immediately to get the process started. It may make its way somehow to TennCare and when it gets pushed through, but it's best just say denied, we're appealing that, and then you can send in everything, all of the calculations. We'd like to do all their work for them. So we send them spreadsheets with each bill and showing them how it's deducted. Helps. They like to not have to do their work. So this is what this screen looks like. Send the Medicaid button, just say if you get this screen, make sure you always click yes. Remember, resources, more expensive car doesn't count as a resource. Find out how much they still owe on the car if that's a problem. Dates of service, not the statement date on the bill is what you're looking at. So when the bills are incurred, it's the date of service. And then all the children count. So remember, high medical expenses for children and pregnant women. That's what you're looking for. Just a quick overview of basic SSI. Again, I did not. Oh, here I got the income limit 750. Sorry, I haven't updated all this. So ignore the actual numerical amounts on here. Earned income disregards, children under 18, their parents' income counts, so there's some disregards there. If children are turned down because of parents' income, they can reapply at 18 and only their own income will count. That's one way to get them on. There are resources, again, $2,000, $3,000 for a couple, excluding homestead and one car. Parents' resources count for children under 18. Okay, there are lots of other SSI related categories. Choices, ECF choices, 1619B, so choices, ECF choices, long-term services supports for people who need nursing facility care or nursing facility equivalent level of care. ECF choices is for intellectual and developmental disabilities. 1619B, and in fact, all of these three are situations because if you get SSI, you automatically get TennCare. If some things can happen, in all three of these cases, something happens that would make you lose SSI, but we've decided as a policy matter, you should not lose your TennCare eligibility when that happens. 1619B is a program that's administered through Social Security that says, if you have a disability, you get SSI, you need Medicaid coverage to work, and you want to work, but if you work, your income is going to be too high to continue getting SSI, and therefore you're going to lose your TennCare. 1619B is a program to say, okay, in that situation, as long as your income stays below a certain amount, you still get TennCare. Pickle, it's actually named after Representative Pickle of Texas. This is for people who have lost their SSI because they get SSI and SSDI, and there's been a cost of living adjustment, an annual cost of living adjustment that has given them more SSDI income, making them ineligible for SSI. We don't want people to lose their Medicaid because of a cost of living increase, so we keep them eligible under the pickle category. And then DAC and DAW is disabled adult widow and disabled adult child, disabled adult widow. This is for children on SSI who start drawing Social Security based on a parent's work history. So let's say a parent dies and they start getting survival benefits from the parent, that we disregard all of that extra Social Security benefit from their income if they still fall below the level that would make them SSI eligible, excluding all the Social Security income from a parent, they remain eligible under the DAC or DAW. This is the biggest problem on redeterminations. They never get it right. We've fought with them over and over again. Just know if you've got a DAC, if they're going to be redetermined, you're going to have to appeal it. It's just a given. A couple of other categories. Breast and cervical cancer covers un- or underinsured women under 65 in active treatment for breast or cervical cancer. Question: how is it legal to only cover women if, in fact, men get breast cancer? Answer: might not be, but insofar as it is, it's because this is all based on a CDC screening program. And technically, so CDC provides funding for state health departments to do breast and cervical cancer outreach, and anybody who is found through that screening program to have breast or cervical cancer, if they qualify, if they're under 250% of the federal poverty level, they can get Medicaid that way if they don't have access to other insurance. It makes sense. If you're going to fund a screening program, you're not going to have a statewide screening program for men for breast cancer. And since it's tied to the screening program, that's the argument for how they can only cover women on the breast and cervical cancer category. No resource limit. There is an age limit that we have seen some flexibility in that. Sometimes it appears that the state health departments are not paying much attention to this, but that is the rule. Goes to the county health department. You do get presumptive eligibility, and then just like everything else, you have to go to the marketplace, apply for regular TennCare. And then, as I said, former foster children, they age out. So until they get age 26, this is a parallel to the ACA provision that allows kids to stay on their parents' insurance until they get 26. They said, well, what about foster kids? Well, we'll let them stay on Medicaid until they turn 26. No income resource limit and all that. DCS, are they doing this? There was, at the beginning, they were, sometimes it was unclear how good a job they were doing.
I think they're doing it more so now.
Yeah.
It's still an issue though.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is retroactive. So as long as somebody is under 26 now, even if they didn't get coverage, they should be able to go through the marketplace and put in an application and be eligible. As long as did you age out of foster care? Yes. And they're under 26 now, it should find them eligible.
I think the problem you see though there is a lot of kids try to get out right before they age out and they don't understand. If I just stay a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And DCS is trying to get them out as fast as possible.
Sorry.
Chris, does the same apply for foster kids leaving custody less than 18 years of age?
They have to have been, yes, as long as they moved out of DCS custody, I think so.
I thought they had to be.
I think they have to be
in
18.
custody and exit. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's aging out of DCS custody. So I think if they get out beforehand, it doesn't go with them because they want it to be seamless from, I mean, the ideal in the future would be, it would just be seamless. They would just stay on TennCare as they aged out. But if they, if they're 17 and move off, then they would lose their TennCare there, or possibly lose their TennCare there, or move into a different eligibility category. Last piece, 2 minutes. Someone who is not categorically eligible for Medicaid and under 100% of the federal poverty level is not eligible for anything. They cannot get premium tax credits to the marketplace because that's only for people between 100% of the federal poverty level and 400%. Because it was assumed that everybody under 100% of poverty level would have Medicaid. The Supreme Court took care of that problem. So if people are under 100% and they're not categorically eligible, so this is mostly going to be childless adults, they're out of luck. If you run across that, we do have a pretty extensive story bank of that. We'd love to hear stories. If you have really sympathetic clients who seem like the kind of people that we would want in stories about why we need to expand Medicaid, please refer them to us so we can just take the story. We'd appreciate it. So got about 1 minute left. Any questions?
Give your contact information, please.
Not on this slide, but I think on the next one I will, but you can, Tennessee Justice Center, Chris Coleman, you can find me.
So Chris, I mean, this is seniors, and I don't know, you may be getting into that, but the main thing that I see with seniors is the MSP. And so, I mean, I have had more MSP that I want to talk about, but others may want to just have a little information about that haven't been
Yeah, I should have
in the past year.
include that. So just a quick run through of MSP. MSP,
Chris,
yep.
We're covering this tomorrow.
Okay,
never
good.
mind then.
Never mind.
Good.
Good. So never mind.
But you pointed out a lot of things like breast and cervical, they can be 65, grandparents, there are a lot of things you go through with kids that matters if you're a senior.
Right.
Just understand
Yeah.
it.
And another thing that I've seen with seniors is where maybe they have disabled adult children, they become seniors and their income gets, which the child's not our client under this grant, but that when they become seniors, the income goes to the child, and TennCare is completely missing the DAX. They're missing the DAX and they're missing the pickles, and for the redeterminations. So we didn't really talk a whole lot about pickle, but
One other group that they're missing pretty substantially, I think. I don't know if they're continuing to do this. We haven't seen them, but I know that I had one hearing, saw one of them. That is For Choices Group 3, anybody who is grandfathered into Choices Group 3, right now Choices Group 3 is you're only eligible if you get SSI. It used to not be the case. When they made that change, anybody who was still on the program was grandfathered in, even without SSI. They remain on there, but if they're redetermined, there's no way on that application to redetermine them for Choices Group 3. And if they're terminated for any reason, unless you can appeal it, they're going to lose their eligibility totally. And for lots of those people, Group 3 is their only TennCare eligibility because they're in the coverage gap otherwise. So it's something to look for, because it basically, the question on the redetermination packet is, are you in a nursing home or do you need nursing home level of care? Choices Group 3 by definition is people at risk of needing nursing home. So most people are going to answer no to that. When they answer no, they say, well, you didn't tell us, so you lost.
Do you have any tricks or tips for decoding what category somebody might be under? So we get lots of messages where it's like, you don't qualify for TennCare. And then it'll have a list of, pregnant and have a cervical cancer, so on and so on and so on. So you don't qualify. But they received that as part of a redetermination, so they were clearly eligible before, but I sometimes have a hard time figuring out what they were eligible for.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time trying to figure it out. I may know some specific tricks, but generally, we just kind of go through process of elimination. Okay, they're not children, they're not this, they must be, usually, we've occasionally even come across some old Daniels people, some people that I think the only way that they were still on is because they were part of Daniels and then they just missed them since they stopped doing redeterminations. Daniels was an old class case where anybody who ever got SSI, once they got TennCare, they couldn't be removed from the program.
So I'm probably the senior person in this room, and I apologize if this is a simple question. But let's say a divorced person is on SSI and was married more than 10 years, so they can draw off of the spouse's work record when they get old enough to get Social Security retirement. What happens if they do that before they're 65?
She lost her SSI because of her husband, and she lost her TennCare, and she's not 65.
Right.
And I think it's also sorry.
Yeah.
She's got a lot.
Yep.
You're required to
Yes.
apply for any other program besides SSI. That happens often with people who are in the 62 to 65 category. Getting SSI, who are eligible, they weren't eligible for SSD because of work history, but by the time they get to 62, they're eligible for early retirement. And that amount is over the SSI amount, they lost their Medicaid.
Attempt to strain them for pickle, but there's a lot of people that say that.
But there is that, and I know you brought my son's DAW.
They have to be working and they have to be a certain.
Yeah, that's better.
But a widow or a widower.
Hey, Chris, getting back to this gentleman's question, I've noticed that when we do TennCare stuff, we also do a SNAP one. And if they do a redetermination, usually if you get the running record, it'll talk about every category. A lot of them have talked about every category, and you'll see, oh wow, they're wrong.
Yeah, even that though, they still use the MAK, and there's secret codes that they have to use that are hard to decipher in that. I think at one point we had a cheat sheet, but I don't even know what happened to that. All right, we're technically out of time, so we'll see you soon.